We've talked about the Browns trading down. What about trading up? We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. If the Browns want the best QB in the class, they may actually have to trade up to get him. What would it take to move up? And I unveil another quarterback on our Locked On Browns quarterback big board. I do want to thank you for being an everydayer with the Locked On Browns podcast and making us your first listen every single day. Remember, you will find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, and with bonus content on some weekends. And it's totally free to you. All you have to do is hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you listen to your podcast. And of course, right here at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel, where you can also get involved in the show by sharing your thoughts on anything we discussed today in the comments section. This is your team, so be part of the conversation every single day. Yes, so we've talked so much at this point about all the possibilities the Browns have at number 2. We have forgotten about one possibility that the Browns have at number 2. They could obviously draft a player. We know the names at this point that are in the mix: Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter seem to be the biggest names linked to the Browns at this point. And, you know, there's all valuable reasons why those guys make sense. Or the Browns could trade back and decide, you know what, value's not there for us. Let's trade back. Let's get somebody else. Giants are a possibility one spot later. Raiders have been in the conversation because they need a quarterback. So there's and I don't want to say an endless amount of possibilities, but there are a number of possibilities that the Browns have at their disposal here to try and, you know, make something of the second overall pick. But if the Browns do decide that their number one guy, their quarterback, is in this class and they want him desperately, there is a world where they have to actually trade up to get him, because the Titans right now are in an interesting situation. Their GM and head coach are sort of on different timelines. Mike Borgonzi was just hired this cycle. You have Brian Callahan, who was just hired last cycle. And so they're not necessarily like paired together in this way that makes it that where they're connected and they're sort of on the same timeline. And so, you know, Brian Callahan probably wants a quarterback. He's been, this is year 2 for him. He wants to find that guy. But Mike Borgonzi might just kind of say to himself, like, hey, listen, I just got here. I have an opportunity here to like maximize my return, maximize the players I'm bringing in, so I can trade back, I can do whatever. And, you know, I'm not going to like lose my job over this decision that I make this 1 year, because most people aren't fired after 1 year on the job. So it creates this interesting situation with the Titans. Could just decide we're not taking a quarterback and we're trading back. And maybe it's to 2, maybe it's to 3, where they can still get a guy that they really like Abdul Carter, whatever. Maybe it's even further back and they get a bigger haul. But they have all the leverage right now because they control the top of the draft board and who has the rights to whatever quarterback people might want. And I think one thing that's kind of come out of the combine is this idea that Cam Ward has separated himself as the number one guy. I sort of believed going in that Cam Ward was the better talent. There's been talk more recently in these last couple of days, and this was at least part of conversations that I had sort of picked up on, the idea that Cam Ward, you know, had done so well in meetings that he was the leader of the pack here. And I do think a team like the Browns was intrigued by him and liked what they saw at the combine. And I do think he's probably the number one guy on their board, even though I've said Shedeur Sanders is a better fit right now. I do think that Cam Ward is the better talent. And Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry have both been adamant that they're not going to pass on a better talent for, you know, just because they think, just because of fit, like they are going to make their offense work. So I think those are sort of, you know, the inner workings or the hints at the idea that Cam Ward could also fit with this team, that they also do like Cam Ward. So I don't want to say he's climbed up draft boards because I think he was already up there. But I do think it's obvious that Cam Ward is very much in play for the Browns, for all these teams, and that there's a lot of love for Cam Ward, especially after the combine, as the potential number one quarterback in this class. So if that's true, if the Browns want him desperately and they feel they need to get a quarterback in this class, and I do think there is something to that because, listen, like Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry, as far as the Myles Garrett situation is concerned, they keep speaking on it as if they know there's a way back to getting Myles Garrett to show up and be part of the team and sing Kumbaya and be happy again. And I just don't know how, when we got the reports last week that Myles Garrett doesn't even want to talk about an extension with the Browns. They want nothing to do with it. They don't care. Like his team doesn't want to negotiate. So how do you get somebody who doesn't want to negotiate back on board? Well, you take the big swing on a quarterback that you are hoping you can convince Myles Garrett is the guy, and you go out and you do that, and you start building around that guy, and then maybe he's convinced to stay. If you convince him you have like the next Jaden Daniels, the next top talent, the next franchise guy that's coming through the ranks here, then maybe Myles Garrett sticks around. That's the only way I can think that they feel comfortable that this thing will get worked out with Myles, is that they know, hey, if we draft a quarterback, it's all going to be good. And I think that best quarterback is Cam Ward. So there's a world where they have to maybe trade up to get him, because there's going to be other teams that want Cam Ward that are going to be willing to give up what they need to give up to get to number one and get Cam Ward. And so this creates the interesting situation where, the Browns then have to decide what it's worth to them. Are they willing to give up their first round pick? And maybe in likely a future first round pick. I want to talk more about what it would cost coming up in the next segment. But yeah, like there's a real path towards this. And I don't think it's that far fetched that the Browns would have to do that to get what they want. And frankly, here's the thing. I get that it's going to come at a cost. I get that, there's been a lot said about this quarterback class and them not being that good. And these guys, Shedeur Sanders and Cam Moore being like 7th or 8th in last year's class, whatever the conversations have been, I get it. But if the Browns are convinced, if they come away from this evaluation process convinced that their franchise quarterback is in this class and it's Cam Ward, they can't miss this opportunity. There's been so much said about the fact that the Browns are drafting second overall, and you hope to not be drafting second overall. I understand the Browns throughout their tenure, especially since they've returned in 99, have drafted pretty high in the draft a lot. It's just kind of been par for the course, right? But the idea here is like you get the quarterback, you get your team built back up, and you're not drafting that high ever again, or not for a really, really long time, right? So there was a lot made of the fact that like you went 3-14, and so now you had this opportunity at the top of the board to do something to really, get your team going in the right direction. If you play your cards right, you don't have to worry about being this high on the board again next year. And that's part of the reason why when you talk about next year's quarterback class, people are like, well, there's no guarantees and you don't know where you're going to be drafting and how far up you'd have to trade to get a quarterback. And everybody who says that is right. Like, I've argued that if you get a second first round pick, if you trade back, that helps your efforts in trying to trade up if you're in like the 10 to 15 range or something like that. So yeah, that's all helpful, but there's still no guarantee that you can get up there. There's still no guarantee that you'll be, close enough to pull the trigger on something like that. So it's still a difficult situation to navigate, and there's a lot of unknowns there. But the one thing that you know right now is that you're drafting second. And the other thing that they might come to know right now is that they have a quarterback in this class that they love, and that maybe it's Cam Moore. And if you're here now, if this is your opportunity to get this guy, you can't pass it up. Like if he is your guy, it's the quarterback position, the most important position in the game. We know that. You got to go get him if you believe in your heart of hearts that he's the guy. That is without 100%, like no doubt in my mind, you pull the trigger if you're Andrew Barron and move up the board. If you think Cam Ward's the franchise guy and you have an opportunity to get him right now, you do it. You don't waffle. You don't wait. You pull the trigger and you do what it takes to get from 2 to 1 to make that happen, because you have this opportunity now. You might not have this opportunity again, and you can't let a quarterback that you believe is the guy go to somewhere else or go to waste and stand pat because you don't want to make the trade. No, you just make the trade. It's a one spot jump. It's still going to cost you a premium because it's a trading to number one, but you do it because you think that's your franchise guy. We'll see how they feel about him and if that comes to fruition. But that is 100%. Like, I believe if you think Cam Ward's the guy and you're worried that someone's going to try to get him a one, or even if the Titans could be considering getting him a one, you got to make the move up to get him because you're here now. You don't know where you're going to be next year or years to come. Even though we know the Browns have been up pretty high in their history, you can't bank on that. Go get your guy. With that said, it is going to come at a premium, as I alluded to. What would it cost to move from 2 to 1? There's a little bit of precedent for this in terms of trading up the board from teams in history. We'll look back at that a little bit and talk about what it would cost the Browns to go from 2 to 1 with the Titans. That's coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, even if you missed the opening tip-off or you want to bet on a fourth-quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. With the NFL season behind us, you already know I'm betting a lot of Cleveland Cavaliers, man. They are red hot. They're on a win streak right now. They got a chance to go to the finals. You can get in on a futures bet on that if you want to, or you can just go game by game and play some same game parlays. You should watch more Cavs basketball if you aren't already because they're fun to watch. And the NBA app is the FanDuel app rather is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com today to join. That's FanDuel.com for your first shot at $150 in bonus bets if your $5 bet wins. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, so we talked about the Browns needing to pull the trigger to move up to 1 if they love Cam Ward that much and they think he's the franchise guy. Now it's all about what it would take to get there. And we do have some precedent of teams trading up to number 1 or number 2 or whatever in the draft. That's happened a number of times to get quarterbacks in the history of the NFL. What we don't have, though, is a team trading from 2 to get to 1. So it's a little bit different in that way. But if anything, that's better for the Browns that you're only moving up that one spot, because it means it's going to cost you a little bit less than some of these other teams had to give up to get there. And so we'll walk through a few of these examples here and sort of get a sense of what it would take for Cleveland to move up. So the examples that I pulled here were the 49ers in 2021 moving up to draft Trey Lance. They had the 12th pick. They moved to 3. And in the process, they gave up the 12th pick, a 2021 third-round pick, and they gave up their 2022 and 2023 firsts. Now, this one, I don't think this isn't one that I think the Browns have to worry about in terms of comparisons, because they're not going to have to give up 3 first-rounders like this year's and the next 2 to move from 2 to 1. It's just not going to happen. The 49ers are moving up pretty significantly up the board, 12 to 3 versus 2 to 1. So I wouldn't worry if I was a Browns fan about the idea that the Browns would have to move multiple. They're going to have to move multiple because you're giving up this year's and next year's, but really that's a pick swap, right? So I wouldn't worry about the Browns having to give up next year's first and the first year after that. But I can almost guarantee you, because as you go through these trades, you're going to notice every single one of them, except for one, included next year's first round pick in it. So the Browns are going to have to give up next year's first, no matter how you want to slice this. And that's just going to have to be a reality that you come to grips with. Now, we'll talk about if you want to do that here in a second, but that's going to be the reality of these trades. The next one I looked at was the Darnold 2018 trade. Jets moved from 6 to 3 to draft Sam Darnold. They gave up, they're obviously the sixth pick that year, a 2018 second rounder. So that same year, second rounder, 2 2018 second rounders. They had 2 of them, and then a 2019 second rounder. This is the only one of these that didn't include next year's first round pick. Was the Jets moving from 6 to 3. 3-spot jump. It's only 3, not 1. They had 2 second rounders at their disposal, which came in handy because that allowed them to not have to give up a second first rounder. and then they gave up a second rounder in 2019 instead. And so that got the deal done. So this one I think is sort of reasonable. It's a 3-spot jump. Maybe this means the Browns could get away with giving up their 2 third-rounders this year and a first next year. And that means they keep their second rounder this year so that they can still get, a highly talented player to help bolster the roster with that number 33 pick, or even use that pick to trade back up into the first round and get another player with a 5th-year option. So there's some possibilities there. But you kind of use this as a precedent for what the Browns could try to pull off, similar to what the Jets did in 2018 to get from 2-1. The Mitch Trubisky trade, I'm sure we remember it pretty well. 2017, the Bears jumped from 3-1. They gave up a 2017 third rounder to go along with the number 3 pick, 2017 fourth rounder, and a 2018 third rounder. This one's interesting because the value isn't quite as high, right? Like they didn't give up quite as much as some of these other teams. They didn't have to give up their first round of the next year. And so there's some precedent for that. Like maybe the Browns don't have to go with their first next year if they can piece together the right combination of picks to jump from 3-1. A 2017 third rounder, a 2017 fourth rounder with what the Bears gave up, and then a 2018 third rounder. That's pretty low value, and admittedly, like probably lower than what the Titans are going to want. And that's part of the problem here too. Is like the market will dictate what the Browns have to give up too. If the Giants are willing to give up more to get from 3-1 to jump the Browns, then the Browns are going to have to give up a little bit more to get there. So I don't know that this is a good example because I think the value. I don't know that in making this trade, the Bears had to give up quite as much to the 49ers to do it. And I don't know that the value is really there. So I find that one kind of interesting. I think you're going to ultimately have to give up more than what the Bears gave up that year. We'll go 1 year later. There was 2 quarterback trades. Goff in 2016, Wentz in 2016. The Goff trade, the Rams jumped from 15 to 2. It was the largest jump in NFL history from into the top 2, giving up the second pick. 2016, there were 2 2016 second rounders. They gave up a 2016 third rounder, a 2017 first rounder. So there's that first rounder the following year, and a 2017 third rounder. That one they had to give up a ton because they were making such a massive jump, and they got Jared Goff out of it. Again, probably a little high for what the Browns would have to give up to go from 2-1. But again, there's the precedent of your 2017 first rounder was in there. Your next year first rounder was in there. The Wentz trade that same year, the Eagles went from 8 to 2, gave up 8 2016 third rounder, 2016 fourth rounder, 2017 first rounder, 2018 second rounder. So they went even for a year into the future further and give up a second rounder in 2018. And then 2012, you had Washington jumping from 6 to 2. They gave up the 6th pick, 2012 second rounder, and 2 and first rounders in 2013 and 2014. So these are all kind of varying. None of them are apples to apples, like I said, because nobody was going from 2-1. The best example you got was the Bears going from 3-1 to get Mitch Trubisky, and the value was lower there. I think it was probably too low for what the Titans could get in a trade, but the market will dictate those things. And so maybe we walk away from this and the Browns don't have to get their first rounder next year. I just think that seems far-fetched. I think ultimately a package from 2-1 or from anywhere on the board to 1, if teams are trying to trade up with the Titans to get Cam Ward, is going to look like this. You swap firsts, you give up your first next year, and you give up some combo of picks this year and next year, whether it's a second rounder this year and a second rounder next year. The 2/3 that the Browns have this year maybe could be part of the equation. And maybe you throw in like another late round pick. The Browns have a stockpile. They have like 9 picks going into this draft this year. Like they could afford to give up like a 5th rounder or something like that to get a deal done. At that point, if you're trying to push a deal across the finish line, you're not going to gripe over something like that. Like you're not going to gripe over a late round pick being tossed in to get a deal, across the finish line there. If it's for your franchise quarterback, you pull the trigger on that. But I would go into it assuming that the Browns will have to give up their first round pick next year to get this deal done. And maybe that's a deal breaker for some of you, because I get it. You just gave up 3 years of first round picks to get Deshaun Watson, and that went royally terrible. And it was a disaster. And on some level, like if this regime falls flat on their face and they get 5 wins next year, you could be talking about a new regime coming in and then not having a first round pick next year. Nobody wants to have to hear that. Nobody wants that, obviously, for the Browns. but it's the reality that we live in, that it might just have to be the thing that you do. If they believe in their heart of hearts, this is the guy, you can't waste this opportunity. We can operate in a world where we're like, well, don't do it because I don't know if you're going to be here next year, and I don't want to have another season without a first-round pick, and I get that. But this regime, if they believe it's the guy, they have to pull the trigger, like I talked about in the first segment. So you get the deal done by giving up the first next year if you have to. And that's just kind of par for the course. But that's what a deal would potentially look like. Would you be on board with that? Would you want the Browns to trade up knowing that they might have to give up their first-round pick next year to get a deal done? I say you have to, but I would assume that's going to be part of the deal. And I get why there's some PTSD with that. But if you think Cam Ward's the guy, again, you just have to do it. It's the nature of the beast. It's how it works in the NFL. So we'll leave that there for now. There will be plenty more conversations to be had about the idea of the Browns trading actually up rather than back to try to get Cam Ward, who is the consensus top quarterback in this class. And by the way, if you think Shedeur Sanders is still a good answer, even if he's the second guy in the class, I at this point believe the Browns are going to be able to stay at 2 and get Shedeur Sanders if they really love him. So I think you're only making the trade up if you want Cam Ward, because he seems to be the guy that has now separated himself and become the top name in the class at that position. Coming up, we have the latest submission to the Browns, the Locked On Browns quarterback big board. It's a veteran in the league. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. All right, so I promised I would get you the latest entry to the Browns quarterback big board. I got 15 names on this list. I got to motor through them because we're running out of time, and we're only at number 5 now because we've done. I'll recap it for you. I always like to start the segment recapping where we're at. Number 1 on the list was Matt Stafford. We got to check him off the. We got to check him off the list. He's not an option. He's staying in LA. My next 2 ones were Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, in whichever order you want them to be, because I said if you're not getting Matt Stafford, these 2 rookies provide the most promising upside in terms of what you're going to get out of them. You can maybe nurture them into the franchise quarterback that you've been longing for, and I like the idea of that more than most of these veterans in the league. Number 4 was Kirk Cousins, because I just think the idea of Kevin Stefanski and Kirk Cousins reunited is interesting, and you're only going to get him for $1.2 million, most likely, the vet minimum, because he's going to get cut. I'm telling you, I will etch it in stone that he's going to get cut at some point here in the next week or so, or maybe longer than that, because you got, free agency starts March 12th, but you'll get that here over the next couple of weeks that he's going to be released. I can promise you he'll be released. And so understanding that, what you're going to get him for, why not take a chance? That brings us to number 5 on the list. And I'm staying in the veteran market here with this next one, because I don't know, like the idea of Derek Carr still intrigues me. I get it. His numbers weren't great these last couple years in New Orleans. He's never been the greatest quarterback, but he flirts at times with being a top 10 quarterback. And, the injuries have started to sort of pile up for him as well. But I guess I just can't quit Derek Carr in terms of it's a guy who throughout his career has thrown for 4,000 yards on multiple occasions, a guy who generally can be a guy who protects the football for you. I mean, we're not that far removed in 2023 from him throwing for 25 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. Like the Browns, if they're getting a veteran, you're not going to get the Patrick Mahomeses of the world. Like that's just not an option. So you're looking for somebody who can sort of steady the ship. You're looking for a veteran that is reliable, that you can depend on, that you can trust to not make the big mistakes, to take care of the football. They talk about decision-making being something they're looking for in any quarterback. That's obviously true for the veteran market as well. And I feel like Derek Carr does a pretty damn good job of that, frankly. So I don't know that he's going to be available. I think with at the combine, I know Mickey Loomis, the team's general manager, he spoke a lot about Derek Carr, and what he was saying made it seem like they're okay with keeping Carr around and relying on him for another season. So I think there's probably some truth in that. I don't necessarily think that they are going to move on from him. And so maybe this is another one that we end up Xing off the list here on my quarterback big board. But the beauty of the quarterback big board is It's the guys that like we're ranking where, or at least I'm ranking and saying it's the Locked On Browns big board. It's like I'm putting I'm putting a placement on these guys in terms of where I think they sort of are. If you're dreaming of the quarterbacks that are available or could be available and where you like them, where you want them, where they sort of fall on this list. So for me, Derek Carr is fifth. He's a veteran option that I trust. And if the Browns are able to pull the trigger to get him, I think it'd be awesome in terms of like a stopgap answer that stabilizes things a little bit. I'm not saying he's the greatest. I'm not saying he's going to take you to the Super Bowl. Again, all these options come with questions about whether or not they can do that. Unless you're drafting a rookie that is, again, incredible, the next great thing, right? That's the only one of these. As you go through this quarterback big board, the only options that give you like a true Super Bowl caliber quarterback that can take your team to that place are the rookie options, because we don't know what they're going to be at the NFL level yet. You're not getting star players, star quarterbacks in this league because those guys don't really change hands. They stay put. They get paid handsomely at that to be their team's face of the franchise. So, yeah, like we know those guys aren't available, but if you're looking for something to sort of steady the ship, stabilize the position, give you something that you can at least rely on and feel at least solid about the position, I think Derek Carr deserves some love here. And so for that reason, I put him fifth on this list. Granted, I don't necessarily think he's going to move based off comments made last week at the Combine by the Saints staff and personnel and their beliefs on how Carr sort of still fits with their team, it sounds like. So I don't know if this is as realistic as some of these other options, but I do have Derek Carr on there as the number 5 option on the quarterback big board. We will keep the quarterback big board rolling throughout the rest of this week. I will dedicate one segment per show the rest of this week to sorting through the rest of these quarterbacks. There'll be some rookies, there'll be some more veteran options on there, and you'll see sort of where my stance is on this. I might have to get to a point where I'm doing 2 a day because we just don't have the time. The free agency opens up next week, and then these guys are really going to start getting off the board, and I don't have time for that. So we're going to have to start rolling through these, but you'll hear more about my quarterback big board and who I have where coming up in the days ahead. I do want to thank you, though, for being an everydayer at the Locked On Browns podcast and for joining me to talk about your favorite football team. As I said, more to come, including more entries to the quarterback big board. And I'm hoping to have more conversations about potentially trading up to number 1. So make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already to make sure Locked On Browns is your first listen every single day. For your second listen, head on over to find our Locked On NFL Draft Show, or you can keep it local by checking out Locked On Cavs, Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being an everydayer at the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. Peace.